All right, welcome to the NFL DFS build. This is a breakdown of the Brazil game for Friday night between the Packers and the Eagles. Let's get right into it. As far as the odds for this game, the Packers are 2-point dogs at most betting sites, 110 money line. But more importantly, the game has a 49.5 total. So it's expected to be close and expected to have a lot of points. So that is something we want to hear when we're talking about DFS. But honestly, I say this every time for showdown games. It is what it is. The game is what it is. You just kind of want to, put together the best possible lineup and look at ways to leverage against the way the field is playing. So, like for instance, right now, Jalen Hurts is coming in at a whopping 25% owned for the captain slot. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with playing Jalen Hurts. He's a freaking machine. But in tournaments, it might make sense to be significantly underweight on him in the captain slot. By the way, if I do help you at all in this video, give it a like, please. That helps us out quite a bit. And also subscribe to the channel so you get alerted to videos just like this. We cover NFL, NBA, and MLB pretty consistently. And we even do some season-long stuff. We did that before the season. So if you haven't drafted your fantasy football draft yet for your league, and you're probably going to do that tonight, I would assume, before the game starts, head over to the channel at the DFS build and see if you can find some of my mock videos that could help you out from your slot. All right, let's get to it. Let's first look at the captains and kind of just inspect which guys we really like at the captain spot and why. Obviously, up top, AJ Brown is the most expensive guy, which is a little bit funny here because he does not have the best projection. And oddly enough, his ownership is really, really low. All things considered. Now, to be fair, he will be probably going up against Jair Alexander. Not sure if Jair will shadow him or not. I also am not entirely sure I care. Obviously, Jair has had a lot of success against high-profile wide receivers. Most notably, last year, he did shut down Jettas in one of the games he faced him in. But I don't know. I don't really want to play too much into matchups. I think if AJ Brown is the most expensive guy and people are going to be worried about the matchup, you combine the price issue and the matchup, and suddenly he's like completely overlooked in the captain slot. I mean, that's captain 101 for me. So right off the bat here, I love AJ Brown as the captain. So we can definitely go to him. And if you don't like him in the captain, you can definitely slide him into flex where he's a little bit cheaper, obviously at 11K flat, but still not cheap. Jalen Hurts is the guy with the best projection and the most ownership at captain. He's got the best floor. Pretty arguable that he has the best ceiling. That might be AJ Brown. But we have a lot of guys to like in this slate for sure. But Jalen Hurts is definitely the safest guy. I probably would be majorly exposed to him in the flex at a bare minimum. I mean, it's really going to be hard to fade somebody who just has such an immense rushing floor. It will be interesting to see what the absence of Jason Kelce does for this offense as a whole. There is speculation that the tush push will not be as effective. There is speculation that, Jason Kelce, he's responsible for, calling out blitzes and getting assignments right and everything. So with him not there, is Hurts going to have to be a little bit more responsible for these things, or is he going to be rattled a little bit easier because he doesn't have his buddy up front helping him out? It's possible. And on paper, the Packers defense, obviously the last few years has not been tough. So another thing to consider is they hired a new defensive coordinator. They made some draft picks. Some of their players got better, obviously. So could the Green Bay defense also have improved enough to make this a problem? Unknown. For now, all we care about is fantasy points, and Jalen Hurts can get those in spades, whether he's running just for regular rushing yardage, throwing to Devontae Smith or AJ Brown, or just popping in really easy, inch rushing touchdowns. So Hurts looks awesome. Like I said, based off of ownership, I would personally be underweight on him in the captain. Certainly nothing wrong with that, but you're just giving yourself less opportunity to not be duped if you finish up at the top. And then if he smashes and like a ton of the field has Hurts in the captain, then you better hope that the other guys you used differentiated quite a bit. So I'll just differentiate immediately, slide Hurts over to the flex, or maybe even fade him sometimes, to make sure I get a little bit of leverage right away. Christian Watson is coming in as the second most owned captain. The funny thing is I love Christian Watson for this game. Feels a little bit too cheap. He's coming at 8.4K as the captain slot. That's really, really nice. And in the flex, let's see what's his price in the flex. 5.6. So the fact that he's going to be this chalky in the captain slot makes me not want to put him in the captain slot. 16%, second highest owned guy. He doesn't even have that great of a projection. If you flip it back over to the base points projection here, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th best projected player. That's because he's kind of a hit or miss guy. He has the speed and explosiveness to take the top off the defense. He absolutely could easily bust 1 or 2 big plays and score multiple touchdowns, which is why I like him. But if he's going to be chalky in the captain slot, I will gladly slide him into flex. And also, the Packers spread the ball around a lot. So if he's going to be that chalky, I'll also leave him out of a lot of lineups altogether. I'll still get a little bit of exposure to him in the captain slot just because Hurts is like dominating the ownership there to the point where, it's also possible that as we get closer to tomorrow night's game, that ownership kind of spreads out a little bit. I know Hurts is going to stick as the top guy, but it's possible because things are spread out that the Green Bay guys, it could kind of, dissipate slightly when it comes to Watson. One thing to keep in mind with Watson and all the Packers wide receivers is Romeo Doubs is iffy for this game. He's got, let's see, what's his issue? He's got a hand injury and he was put on the injury report like in the middle of the week. So if he's out, then obviously Watson gets a boost. Jaden Reed gets a boost. A couple other, Dontavian Wicks gets a major boost. So Dontavian Wicks would end up being very, very interesting in the captain slot. He's going to have no ownership there. But that could change. If Dobbs gets officially ruled out before the game, that obviously would increase his ownership and all the other Green Bay guys for sure. But we come down here, where is he at? Yeah, like not owned at all. So Dontavian Wicks. Let's see, where is Jaden Reed? He's at 6%. That's fair. So Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks will look really, really good. They look good anyways. But if Dobbs is there and they're at full strength offensively, it's kind of a guessing game. And just me personally, if it's going to be a guessing game and if it's really that spread out, which it appears to be, I'm going to lean on the guys who are less owned. So that would mean fading or being underweight on Christian Watson, which pains me because I love Christian Watson. I think he's in for a huge year. I think he's going to smash in this game. But you have to lean into variance when it comes to DFS in general, especially volatile sports like NFL and MLB. So I'm just going to hope that, overall, if I'm casting out a bunch of lineups here, casting a wide net, that being underweight on Watson is something beneficial to me. So let's just look at the other guys who are projecting well and, what our interest level is. Jordan Love looks totally fine. The Eagles were not good against quarterbacks last year. They ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed per game to quarterbacks. They also ranked dead last against wide receivers. So I think the Packers could have a field day here. I like Jordan Love quite a bit. I think he's an okay captain at 8% ownership. I like the ownership quite a bit on him. Obviously, I don't like his ceiling as much as Hurts. I don't like his floor as much as Hurts. And then there's other guys that are just a little bit more appealing when you start looking at the ownership. Like A.J. Brown is more expensive, but he's half the ownership of Love, and he just can absolutely pop off. The Packers have a pretty balanced offense. It's entirely possible that Josh Jacobs goes off instead of Jordan Love in the passing game. So you have to consider that. Josh Jacobs is carrying 9% ownership. He's a top 5. He has a top 5 projection for this slate. I like Josh Jacobs plenty. But it's not the best matchup when you look at the game. The Eagles are a little bit tough up front. And you have to consider, if the Eagles do end up like dominating this game in the trenches, I don't know if that's entirely the way I feel about this game, but if that does end up happening, then Josh Jacobs maybe would have a little bit lower ceiling than what we would like him to have at that price at 12.3K. It's a little bit steep, but he does have a ceiling. He is going to be really involved. And we do have to consider, if we look back at last year, Aaron Jones, when he was healthy, was an absolute menace down the stretch. In my opinion, Josh Jacobs is a better, more explosive talent. I don't know if he's quite the receiver Aaron Jones is, but he's not a bad receiver out of the backfield by any means. So he is definitely a home run hitter. And I do have interest in him, especially if he's going to be, not like super chalky. Up at the top, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley. Those are the two other guys that really stand out as far as projection. Devontae Smith has the 6th best fantasy projection, and Saquon's coming in as the 4th. Saquon's going to be pretty owned at 14% in the captain. Devontae's only 4%. So obviously, between the two, I would rather be overweight on Devontae and underweight on Saquon. Historically speaking, Saquon could just absolutely feast here. He has a lot going for him. He's got the narrative of, proving the Giants wrong for not paying him and just proving everybody wrong who thinks he's just done. And then unless the Packers run defense just fixed itself with their changes in the offseason, it's entirely possible Saquon runs all over them. The last time he played them, I think it was in London 2 years ago. He demolished them. He had like 120, 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, just had an awesome game. So Saquon looks great. I would rather play him in the flex, though, because he is a little bit expensive and he is a chalky captain. Devontae Smith, yeah, I already said 4% owned. Love that. I love the Eagles receivers and the captain. Obviously, you would pair them with Jalen Hurts too. If Dobbs is out, Jaden Reed and as I said, Dontavian Wicks are very decent flyers in the captain slot as well. But good luck predicting which one actually hits, right? I would just get more exposure to them than the field is getting. Is my main point for that. The other main guy that we can actually feel good about would be Dallas Goedert. I don't know. I mean, both these defenses are kind of middle of the pack against tight ends. Goddard is maybe the third option here. It depends what they end up doing. It depends if their schematic changes end up using Saquon Barkley more as a receiver than the Eagles have used the running backs in the past. If that is true, then Goddard would probably slide to fourth, on the totem pole here. And in that case, he wouldn't be quite as appealing. He's not the cheapest. I mean, for 8.7 at captain, I would rather just eat the chalk and Christian Watson or drop down to Dontavian Wicks. He just doesn't look, that exciting. So some more volatile captain plays that we can consider. Jahan Dotson, 4.8K at the captain, third receiver for the Eagles. I don't really know how involved he's going to be. Obviously, he wasn't very consistent with the Commanders, but he gets a major upgrade across the board playing for Philly. So he is a little bit interesting, certainly in play in the flex as well. Luke Musgrave, starting tight end for the Packers. He is interesting at 6.9K. Not safe at all, but he is interesting because, number one, not that expensive. Number two, not going to garner any ownership in the captain slot. And number three, Tucker Kraft popped up on the injury report as well with a back issue. So usually when you have a back issue the same week of a game, you don't play. So my guess is Kraft is not going to play, which is a bummer because he helps Green Bay's running game with his blocking quite a bit. And also he's a pretty darn good pass catcher as well. But yeah, if he's out, Luke Musgrave is going to get all the tight end snaps and he'll look awesome. At running back, both Marshawn Lloyd and Emmanuel Wilson are banged up for the Packers. It sounds like Emmanuel Wilson, he was limited on Wednesday, so it sounds like he's probably more likely to play. But technically, they both are projecting to play. I'm not really going to go dumpster diving with the Packers backup running backs unless one of them is out. If one of them is out, you can take a shot on them in a couple, like a sprinkling of captain slots, and you absolutely can use, you can use anybody in the flex. If they're cheap and allow you to get the captain you want and the other guys you want, you can do whatever you want in the flex. But I wouldn't feel amazing about Emmanuel Wilson or Marshawn Lloyd with their pretty tiny roles in the captain slot. Let's see here. Bo Melton, if he's active and Dobbs is out, 1.8K, that's a fun little flyer. Would be risky in the captain, but viable, and he definitely would be an interesting money saver in the flex. Just trying to make sure we're covering everybody here. I think that's probably about it. The Eagles look to be at full strength where it matters, and the Packers are really the ones. That's where you're going to find your value. Oh, let me speak to the kickers and defenses first. For one, with the game total, not interested in the defenses. Neither of these quarterbacks are really turnover prone. The Packers defense could be better, but maybe just for the start of the season and because the Eagles are good, just assume that they're not going to completely shut them down. And the Eagles are a pretty aggressive defense, but statistically last year they weren't great. So a pretty good and balanced Packers defense is probably going to move the ball and put up some points. So I don't really have interest in the defenses. Considering that, though, and it being a tournament, you could absolutely play one or two of them. I probably wouldn't play them together, but you could do that and just bank on variance really being in your favor and just one of them just going nuts and helping you out at probably low ownership. Then the kickers, Jake Elliott and who's this guy? Braden Narvison. I don't know what the Packers are doing at kicker. Kickers are always in play just because they're going to get points for the extra points. And if the game isn't going very well and the defenses are playing, better than expected, maybe they'll get a bunch of field goals. So obviously Jake Elliott is the better option there, way safer. He's a proven commodity. He averaged almost 9 fantasy points per game last year. So he plays in the more stable offense, arguably. So Jake Elliott's definitely the guy. I don't really want any Narvison, but if you want to get a safe guy who's going to get points out there, the kickers are definitely in play. I think we touched on just about everybody. I kind of like to have the focus on the captain, and then like whatever happens with the ownership and what you decide, then you kind of kick these other guys over to the flex. So, I mean, right now, as it stands, if you're just looking at upside and value, I think my favorite way to start this out would probably be really overweight on Wicks with the assumption that, that Watson's gonna be chalky at 16% owned, and that Dobbs might be out or limited. So if that happens, then assuming Wicks ownership doesn't just spike like crazy, then he's going to be unowned in the captain. So slide him in the captain, and then we can go get what's AJ Brown's actual ownership across the board on flex? Still, I'm for showdown slate 38%, not crazy. So I think we can look at him. I do think, though, this is one of those things I talk about all the time with Showdown. There is a difference between your interest level depending where you use a player. So AJ Brown being completely unowned in captain because of his price makes me really be interested in him to use him in the captain slot. But since he's going to garner ownership in the flex spot, I don't think he's as much of a must. But I would definitely want one of these Eagles receivers for sure. I definitely want Jalen Hurts, so we can put in Jalen Hurts. I'll probably get Devontae here just because he's cheaper. We can slide down and we can eat the chalk with Christian Watson in the flex. And then we're looking at 8.3K left. Jaden Reed at 6.4 is just way too cheap. And then we can round it out with Jordan Love, Saquon, or Josh Jacobs. And just because, I think it does always seem to be the right move to add both quarterbacks if you think the game's going to be high scoring. And because I have Dontayvion Wicks in the captain slot, I'll put in Jordan Love. But obviously, Barkley is a tough fade, and fading AJ Brown is tough too. Now, this is just a sample lineup. Wicks in the captain, Hurts, Devontae, Watson, Reed, Love. But you can just kind of take all that and just factor into how you are going to end up being exposed to certain players. The moral of the story for this game is we're going to get a lot of points, and there's a lot of really good guys to choose from. So at some point, though, you do need to be able to take a stand and say, you know what, I like this player, but I'm going to go underweight at captain, or I like this player, but I'm going to fade him in this many of my lineups. So that is how I would approach this slate. And, it looks like the Eagles are kind of the overall more chalkier offense just because people trust them more. So I would lean harder into the Packers for sure, which is nice because Musgrave, or not Musgrave, but Kraft and Dobbs might not play, which opens up a little bit more value if you want to take some of those deep shots. All right, that is going to do it for me. If you haven't checked out the Thursday night video, it should be at the end of this one. You can check that out and help you before tonight's game. And hopefully this helps you win on Friday as well. Look out for the full week 1 video on Sunday, and then hopefully we'll get a Monday slate video out too. I do hope this helps you. This process, this breakdown points you to some plays that maybe you weren't really considering, just gives you an eye on projections and ownership and roster building and that all kind of stuff. But also be sure to use some kind of lineup optimizer if you're going to run a lot of lineups. Don't want to go hand building every single lineup you do. Let the computer do a little bit of the work for you. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. Good luck, and we'll catch you next time.